Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I thought I'd just catch up with my personal thoughts on this election campaign, my attempted role in it, and how it's quite different to what I was expecting. Because this is the second general election I've covered as a political commentator on YouTube. 5 years ago, I was building the channel. I knew I was swimming against the tide. I tried to produce a series of videos aimed at offering people what I thought might be practical advice on pissing in the wind, such as organising to help people to vote who might need help. Now, maybe you could help organise transport to those with difficulties getting to the polling station if they didn't have postal votes. Just generally trying to persuade apathetic voters not to let other people vote their future away. The same sort of things you can suggest to people in any election, and this one is no different. But those videos got way fewer views than the equivalent ones do now, were more likely to hit stonier ground anyway because the polls, they just don't get things that wrong. We were on for a beating and we knew it. In fact, I was talking to my fiancée about this. She was one of the people who went to bed on the night of the Brexit referendum thinking Remain would win. That was the narrative. Wasn't what the poll said. There was a momentum of polling narrowing through the campaign and all on course for a flip to Leave on the day of the vote itself. The difference between those who get their information from polling and those who get it from other sources is those who get it from polling never surprised. Actually, there was that one time in 1992 when a hung parliament looked like it was on the cards. Then it turned out to be a small Conservative majority. That was it, though. That was the single biggest polling error we've had in the UK. No other major vote result has been a surprise, whether it be a general election or a referendum result. But for about 2 years now, I've been getting ready for this general election. I took a long run up at it, considering how I would be using the channel to cover it. And there's one huge difference between what I'd planned and what happened. In 2022, I started collecting data from the Office for National Statistics. I've got spreadsheets. Some of it was tricky to find, so I actually contacted them for help. They're actually amazingly responsive. Full credit to them. I was expecting to run videos where I would use this data to show the real story of the improvements that the last Labour government brought and the decline which has characterised every single year of this Tory government. And yet, you may have noticed, these videos are conspicuous by their absence. No, it's not just because I became ill during the campaign. That's been annoying. It is because as we got closer to the general election, and certainly from the start of this year, it became clear it was going to be completely unnecessary. The data will still be useful in the future when I'm plotting Labour's progress, but right now, the damage has been done in this Parliament, and it is so obvious, you don't need graphs or calculations to highlight it. You know, looking at NHS waiting lists, real terms incomes, real terms cost of housing, education funding, state of the military, trade figures, you know, all things which need careful presentation to show people the real picture. And yet none of it is necessary. When Rishi Sunak took over in the autumn of 2022, he had options. He could have just made some things better. For a couple of years, he had the option of just not being so Tory, actually starting to fix some things, being able to get people thinking, oh, the pressure's lessening. And you know what? Lots of voters may have believed his lies about turning a corner and decided it would be better to stick with the Conservatives than risk the unknown of a Labour government. I don't think Sunak really had the option of charting a course to another majority government. I think Liz Truss killed that possibility off completely. But he absolutely could have kept Labour down to a small, difficult to manage majority. I'm not sure I could even rule out a hung parliament. If Sunak had just acted to get waiting lists down, which was possible, improve water quality in our rivers, apply proper windfall taxes, just for a couple of years, he could have gone back to corporate interests after the election, but, you know, proper windfall taxes, use the money to subsidise lower energy bills, make people feel that their standard of living was going up. Now, this is not the Tory way, of course, but they could have done it. They could have chosen to do it. After 12 years of squeezing the life out of people, they had the option of just spending a couple of years taking the public off the torture rack, giving them a nice cup of tea, telling them things were going to be better now, And some people would have fallen for it, and maybe they could have charted a path towards winning the election, possibly. And then they got another 5 years out of it. Another 5 years of stealing out of it. But instead, Sunak chose to keep them on the rack, keep turning the wheel and trying to gaslight the victims into thinking they would get their cup of tea later, but only after they voted for him again. It hasn't worked. It was never going to work. When I thought I might need to arm people with the sort of information which could help persuade wavering voters that they'd be talking to, I worked on the basis that the Tories wouldn't actually be this stupid. I mean, look at the general position here. The public are focused on two key issues: the cost of living and the state of public services, NHS being paramount, but in general, the state of public services. The two issues are, of course, very strongly linked. But Sunak has insisted that his priority is cutting taxes. It's all he's going on about, cutting taxes. But cutting taxes means spending less on public services. But people want the public services to be better funded, not worse. The entire Tory strategy is based around making an offer to the public which is the opposite of what they want. So my entire focus during this campaign has changed. 2 years ago, I thought it would be provide useful information to attack the Tory record. No need. It's so bad, people actually see it for themselves. So the focus changed to promoting the idea that the Tories could actually be wiped out as a political force, at least for a long time. Not like in 1997. Oh no, they still led the opposition then. They had the option to rebuild. The fact that they made bad decisions as to how to rebuild initially has been put down to a number of things, but they had the option. It was within their power. It's just that they used their power to go with William Hague, first of all, who was bright enough, but no match for Blair in the leadership, and then bafflingly Ian Duncan Smith, who could lose a debate with a mirror. This time their fate may be out of their hands. The damage they've done with Brexit, pollution in our rivers, Partygate, betting scandal, so many other things as well. And they may suffer further reputational losses as more information comes out, as investigations and public inquiries continue over the next few years. When Labour chased down the money from COVID fraud, people will ask, well, why didn't Sunak do that? The same if Labour organised investigations into, say, foreign interference in our democracy. The potential exists for Tory skeletons to keep tumbling out of the closet for years to come. They may need to get rid of all of their current big names before they can move on. The story of this election has not been one of persuading voters that the Tories have made everything worse. People see that. It's one of showing people how they can apply the consequences. Because the first past the post system protects a lot of bad MPs. It's no surprise that some of the craziest MPs we've got are in safe seats. They'd struggle to win marginals, so you have to put them in safe seats. And so all too often people don't vote, even though they don't like their MP, because they don't think it'll make a difference. Now, unfortunately, this is rarely true, because the number of people who have that attitude and don't vote collectively can actually beat most majorities. But you'd have to have faith that all of those other apathetic voters would turn up, and you don't really believe that. But it's been clear for a while that that is not the case this year. If you look across the MRP polls, there's like a dozen seats where they all agree the Tory candidate will win. And even then, not by enough to make it certain. Now, in reality, the Tories are going to win more than a dozen seats. They're not, unfortunately, going to be completely wiped out because people will not believe enough that they can be. They could win a lot more. In fact, they might win about 100, but they also might just win a few dozen. That's how close it is this year. And the story of this election has really been, can we persuade enough people of that? Because the polling suggests we're almost there, especially if they live in those marginal constituencies. I say marginal now. They weren't. They were really safe at the last election, but they're now marginal. So I'll echo what I said in 2019, but with a bit more expectation. Please find out amongst the people you know well, if they're registered to vote and they've got valid voter ID, because if they haven't got those things now, they're probably a bit buggered. Have they got those two things? Check that they know they need to take their voter ID with them. If they're able to vote, but it sounds like, I can't be bothered, try to persuade them to turn out. You know them, what will work. Maybe leading towards people who aren't going to vote for the Tories or Reform, I guess. If they come up with some minor inconvenience that will stop them going, try to remove it. If you're in one of the top tactical voting targets, maybe try and persuade them, well, if you're not going to use your vote anyway, and I'm going to bug you until you do, maybe you'd like to use your vote tactically. You know, if you're not that bothered. Maybe you could vote tactically with the advice from stopthetories.vote, because this really has been the most extraordinary election campaign. It began with Rishi Sunak's announcement in the pouring rain, when he had access to a multi-million-pound indoor press conference room just behind him. The Tories thought the polls would narrow, as if it's some universal law of elections or something, even though it doesn't actually happen most of the time. The idea was that they would then scare the public with talk of a hung parliament and the SNP holding the balance of power, you know, just like they have in the past. When this didn't happen, they just panicked. They just panicked. They had no plan B. Their campaign is becoming increasingly deranged and disgusting as we draw close to polling day, but they're now just selling their souls for little return. Postal ballots will have been returned by now, the ones that were sent out on time anyway. If you haven't got your postal ballot yet, contact your council. If you've done everything you should have had to do, they need to make sure you can vote, right? So please do that. If you've had problems with the postal ballots, get onto them. But, you know, many of them have gone in. You've probably got about a fifth of the votes already cast as a result of that. There's not going to be a lot of change to people's voting attitudes at this point. At the time this video goes out, you're talking, 90 hours until Sunak has to offer his resignation to the King, is thrown out the back door, and Keir Starmer is invited to form a government. It's really just a case of whether voters decide to let the Tories win enough MPs to run the opposition if they feel sorry for them, or decide, no, you don't deserve any role in our recovery from your 14 years of stupid evil, and the Lib Dems should be treated with that task. You know, hence the focus for me throughout this campaign being tactical voting rather than trying to point out the Tory failures, which are so obvious that even senior Tories can't deny them. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe for further content and click the like button. You can also sign up for memberships if you'd like to support the channel further. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.